Howdy! It's Bill Turner from Oklahoma. How's your dog? All right, how's everybody out there in video land, YouTube land, wherever land you're in, whatever land you're in? I wanted to reiterate the point that I made before, which is that I'm aware of the fact that I'm acutely aware of the fact that there are a lot of people in the country who are still suffering, around the world for that matter, who are still suffering badly in various ways. People in hospitals with COVID, and people in detention camps at the border, and people in homeless, and people in court, and people because they're getting evicted, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so I'm not trying to make light of the suffering that's going on in the country and in the world right now. But at the same time, from my perspective, a lot of the things that are going on now are incredibly funny, especially insofar as Trump is making a complete fool out of himself, which of course is not news because he's been nothing but making a complete fool out of himself ever since he started running for president. Long before he started running for president, he's always been nothing but a complete buffoon and a fool. And he's just making it worse for himself now that he's served his term as almost finished his term as president and lost the presidential election. So he lost his run for a second term, and he refuses to admit that. But anyway, and so again, I want to also reiterate the point that that my purpose in making these videos is to point out just how incredibly stupid and crazy Donald Trump is, how stupid and crazy the Republican Party is, and how stupid and crazy you have to be to support the Republican Party at all. This isn't, Trump changed the Republican Party. He didn't change anything. The Republican Party, he took over the Republican Party very easily. They had no way of stopping him because he was on their brand, and they would have had to alienate their base if they tried to stop him from winning the nomination in 2016. And they didn't dare do that because that's all they have. They only want Republicans only seek office because they would like the prestige and the perks and the opportunity to enrich themselves. And they only want power for its own sake. They don't actually have any governing agenda. They don't have any ideas. They nothing but tax cuts, more tax cuts is their only idea, and it's not a very interesting idea. It's a politically easy sell, but it's starting to even wear out. They're even just starting to wear out the political ease of it. And so because people are starting to catch on to the fact they don't really benefit from tax cuts, and more tax cuts. And so and Donald Trump obviously Richard Nixon taught Republicans to win with dog whistle racism, and Donald Trump would full voice of the racism, and because the Republican Party base is racist, they can't slap down a racist without losing their base. So they're stuck. They're stuck with Donald Trump, and it's incredibly funny in some ways. I mean, racism is not funny, and people suffering from racism is not funny. But the plight of the Republican Party with respect to Donald Trump is incredibly funny, in my opinion, anyway. But I'm really at the moment I'm really kind of irritated, frankly, because just after I posted my last video on Wednesday, I posted the video and then went back to partner on my computer looking at things, and saw on Twitter where Donald Trump had pardoned Michael Flynn. You remember Michael Flynn, the guy who was Donald Trump's first national security advisor, who then had to quit very soon after that because he got caught having talked to the Russian ambassador and talked to the Russians in various ways, which was inappropriate for him to do before he became national security advisor. And then he also had been a registered agent for the Turkish government and done, and Obama he worked for Obama for a while, but Obama fired him because he's crazy, and he propagates conspiracy theories. He's a total nut job all around, and Obama warned Trump not to hire him, but Trump, wouldn't want to listen to good advice, especially not coming from that black guy. So Trump went in and hired him to be national security advisor. That didn't last very long. And so, and he was under investigation by the FBI, and trying to get the FBI to stop this investigation of Trump is what got Flynn was what got Trump in trouble, because he allegedly, according to James Comey, Donald Trump, who can believe? I believe James Comey. James Comey made a huge mistake by renewing this investigation and announcing it's renewed and completing an effectual and inconsequential investigation of Hillary Clinton right before the election in 2016. That was a dumb move. But you can be FBI director and still be kind of politically inept, and that's what James Comey did as far as he was concerned. It was just a huge mistake on his part. But he's still, I trust him far, far more than just Donald Trump. I don't trust Donald Trump for anything at all. And in any conversation between James Comey and Donald Trump, I believe James Comey. And so Comey said that Donald Trump essentially tried to ask him to stop investigating Michael Flynn. And that's what got the whole Mueller investigation started. And that's, that's typical Trump and typical, because Roy fired the director of the FBI. Well, yeah, except he should have a legitimate reason for doing so. And it's perfectly reasonable to go in and investigate what he's doing and what he's up to if he does it for a weird, stupid reason. But anyway, now he's so Flynn pleaded guilty twice before a federal judge and signed his plea, and there's a plea agreement out there with his signature on it. Then he decided to try to withdraw his plea agreement, which is really hard to do. And then the Justice Department under the ever corrupt Bill Barr tried to cancel the prosecution entirely, with the federal judge saying, I don't really think I should let you do that. And so that's still going on out there, in the ether. But now he's gotten a pardon. So I mean, I don't know whether all that will necessarily go away completely, but anyway, it significantly decreases the chances of Michael Flynn actually going to prison. Which I mean, it's something I don't really care about whether Michael Flynn goes to prison or not. But it's just an very telling instance of the grotesque corruption of the Trump administration. Trump pardons the wrong people. He pardons people who don't deserve pardons. He pardoned that nasty bastard that military guy got convicted of shooting at innocent civilians was it Iraq or Afghanistan? I can't remember. It doesn't matter. He was shooting at innocent civilians and killed some of them. And he did. And you shouldn't be able to get away with that in the U.S. military. Any military at all, but especially not the U.S. military. And he got prosecuted and convicted for it, and Trump pardoned him because that's the kind of gross, nasty, sort of disgusting. That's just Trump to a T. He's disgusting and nasty and has no concept of the rule of law. Doesn't understand it and doesn't have any respect for it at all. So anyway. So there we are. Okay, so that's Trump, but that's sort of the thing. But as I say, I had literally just posted my last video on Wednesday, and then found out that Trump had pardoned Flynn, and so damn. But anyway, so now I got a chance to talk about that and how horrible and disgusting and reprehensible it is. But so it seems as if Rick Scott has already trotted out what we can assume is the new Republican lie, which he's now saying that we need new laws, including national voter ID to prevent voting fraud. And of course, this is the same thing that Republicans have been lying about for years now. Oh, there's a horrible problem through it. And then the same basic lie that Trump keeps telling about the 2020 election, rampant voter fraud. We do. The people who actually study this in a dispassionate, nonpartisan way clearly have found over and over again that the incidence of voter fraud in the United States is minuscule. And the few people who do actually commit voter fraud are almost always Republicans. So no, we do not need national laws to try to prohibit voter fraud. This is just Republicans' cheap attempt to try to keep black people from voting, which is their primary goal right now, because they know that black people aren't going to vote for them, and they're not going to do anything to try to get. They're not going to try to do anything reasonable or legitimate, like try to think of policies that might help black people. They're just going to try to keep black people from voting. And so this is now Rick Scott is now carrying water for the Republican Party, as he always does. And so watch out for a barrage of ridiculous claims from Republicans. Oh, we need national legislation to combat voter fraud. Happily, as long as the Democrats continue to control the House of Representatives, any such bills at the federal level almost certainly will not pass. So we don't have to worry too much about any actual legislation that would make it harder for black people to vote. Everything we should restore the Voting Rights Act, which is the suppressed version, which was to eliminate the systematic discrimination against black voters in most southern jurisdictions, which is where in 1965 and still to this day most black people lived, which is why it's most important. Those are the most important places to combat racism in voter registration and voting election administration. So we need to restore the Voting Rights Act. Let's make that a priority. Raise, scream, and yell. I contact your members of Congress telling me you need to restore the Voting Rights Act. But this also brought up. I mean, I had this very interesting. I tend to go. I tend to be pretty much mostly a real big picture kind of guy. I see think in terms of wholes and large ideas and big concepts. This is the way I like to think. I'm not. I mean, if there's something particular, especially if I look at a piece of writing in English, I get real particular and real detail oriented real soon. And I get upset over unnecessary hyphens. Adverbs never need a hyphen to modify an adjective. Anytime if you put in a hyphen between an adverb and an adjective, you're wrong. Don't do that. Well, never need to hyphen to modify any adjective. Never put a hyphen between well and any adjective because it doesn't need to be there. Don't use people use way too many hyphens. People that misuse quotation marks all the time. Your chances are, if you attempt to use quotation marks, if you can't explain, quotation marks are useful to indicate direct quotations and to indicate ironic distance from the word you're using. So if you're using a word that most people use in a particular way and you don't want to fully agree with people, the meaning that people must attribute to that word, then you can put it in quotation marks. If people just put quotation marks willy-nilly as if they're purely decorated, don't do that. Trust me up a wall. That kind of detail I can totally get. I'm very focused on, but mostly I'm a real kind of big picture philosophical kind of guy. And so I had this thought that occurred to me that the big problem that the big problem that Trump's creating for Trump's been back to two big problems. First of which is that Trump is busy attacking Republicans. He's going down to Georgia to try to campaign. He's still trying to insist that Georgia got stolen from him, which he didn't. They had a hand recount. They know that the results, the current voting results in Georgia are as solid and as reliable and as the days long. There are few things in the world that you can be more confident of than that Biden carried Georgia. But Trump is he still wants to dump on the poor Secretary of State in Georgia, Republican Secretary of State in Georgia, for having certified the results. He just did his job. And so Trump is now attacking the state and local Republicans who don't carry water for him in his ridiculous claim that he won the election. And that's going to start to destroy the only strength the Republican Party has, which is party loyalty. So it's going to be really amusing to watch, to see what happens to the Republican Party as a result of having let Trump take it over. But the other problem that I thought of is that it's really interesting. So I just happened to stumble on Twitter across this tweet about how this guy whining about how conservatives in the United States are supposed to be defending classical liberalism. Oh boy! And so I mean this points up the big problem. So the United States is the apotheosis of the liberal republic, and the guy who defined Western liberalism in the Anglo-American dispensation anyway, John Locke, the 17th century English philosopher John Locke, had a huge impact on the founders of the United States. I mean, just everything, high intellectual culture, and like even like had primers to learn, teach people how to read, were imbued with Lockean ideas in colonial America. Locke was a hugely influential figure, and the Declaration of Independence is basically Locke's Second Treatise of Government reduced to a single document, a much smaller document. Second Treatise of Government is a big laborious tome that's much longer than it needs to be because there's a lot of repetition. But and Jefferson sort of boiled it down severely and got it into a single, that we hold this truth to be self-evident that all men and women should say women, but it doesn't. That all persons are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. That and that to secure these rights, government starts among men, right? So the idea being that the only reason we have government is because we need some mechanism to try to defend our natural rights, okay? And this is basic concept, and this is very, rights claims are very liberal. The idea of rights claims, the idea that you have something irreducible freedom that the government should never intrude on. It doesn't matter who it is. No government should be able to intrude on your natural rights. That's a very liberal idea, okay? And so now, but the problem with conservatives, if you're really historically conservatives, real conservatives, especially back in the days when Locke was writing the Second Treatise of Government, the conservatives are the people who defended the monarchy. And a monarchy, one of the key differences, say, as between the legal regime of England and the legal regime of the United States, is that the government in England can do a lot of things to you they can't do in the United States, especially if you piss off the Queen. Because the Queen is sovereign, and so the Queen gets to make the rules, and the Queen gets to decide what the Queen wants to do. And you piss off the Queen, she can come after your ass. We can't. Now, Donald Trump seems to think he should be able to operate that way in the United States, but he can't. And he can't because of the fact that we have rights, and that my rights are, should in principle. Now, obviously, there's a question of whether how effectively this gets defended, but and it's part of the reason why, for example, also we have. And people have been complaining recently about the point that federal judges get lifetime appointments. The reason for that is because we want to insulate federal judges from political interference. And the Third Circuit Court of Appeals just shot down the latest appeal over a lawsuit, Trump campaign's election lawsuit in Pennsylvania. And the guy who wrote the decision shooting down the Trump campaign was a Trump appointee. So he didn't have to worry, Trump appointed him, but Trump can't fire him now that he's a federal judge. And so he actually followed the law. Imagine that. Which is an interesting indication of the way in which people seem to think that just because Trump appointed judges, that judges are always going to do what Trump wants them to do. They're not. They're going to, to some extent, if you got to be, a lot of his judicial appointments were grossly unqualified, but still at some level they must have gone to law school, they must have law degrees, they must have been admitted to bars. They must have some level of commitment to the principles of the law in the United States. And that can still rear its ugly head and slap down Donald Trump. So they just slapped down Donald Trump. So, but anyway, complaining about, so it's really hard to be a conservative in the United States because the Constitution is a monument to Western liberalism. It just is a distinctly liberal document. It exists to defend the rights of minorities, which is not something that conservatives necessarily care about. Conservatives believe in order above all else. And and if your identity happens to violate their sense of order, they're going to smack you down and discriminate against you, and they don't think you should care. That is basically this is the core thing about especially right now, which is most clearly with respect to the Christians' attempts to try to figure out ways in which they can get get around non-discrimination laws and be able to discriminate against queers, because they really don't like queers. They don't like lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender people, and they think they should be able to discriminate against queers. And so they, and by God, that's the conservative position. Liberal position is that everybody should have the same rights, and it doesn't matter who you are, doesn't matter if you're queer, doesn't matter if you're black, doesn't matter if you're Asian, doesn't matter if you're Mexican, doesn't matter anything. You should have the same rights, and so that's the liberal position, and conservatives don't like that. But anyway, so now, so if you're a conservative in the United States and you still want to try to have some measure of intellectual respectability, what you can do is say, oh, well, wait a minute, we're really defending classical liberalism, and classical liberalism is this idea. Well, gosh, I mean, so with the original version of the Constitution, original version of the Declaration of Independence articulates classical liberalism, and these wacky 20th century liberals, supposed liberals like Franklin Roosevelt and Lyndon Johnson, got away from classical liberalism, and they're using the federal government in ways they shouldn't use the federal government. Okay, whatever it is. So the real problem, the interesting, the test should always be that. So what these people are basically saying is that the Reconstruction Amendments, the three major constitutional amendments, the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments we adopted right after the Civil War, to eliminate slavery and to try to assure some measure of equality for the newly freed slaves. They mostly went completely unenforced for about 100 years, but there was an effort to try to do that with those constitutional amendments. That those constitutional amendments, and then 100 years later, the major civil rights legislation, the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act, which had the effect of trying to really finally give some federal enforcement to the principles of that newly freed slaves and their descendants deserve to be treated equally in the United States. Wacky idea, it seems obvious to me, but what do I know? That these are somehow illegitimate uses of federal power. No, they're not. And then, so anytime you give somebody starts whining about, oh gosh, the big bad, hairy, ugly federal government, ask them what it is they're doing to you that bothers you. And ultimately, so conservatives, William F. Buckley explicitly wrote to defend racial segregation in the 50s and 60s. He did. You can look it up. It's easy to find on. Look up Buckley segregation, and you'll find specific examples of William F. Buckley specifically writing to defend racial segregation. Long after everybody else was like, well, we really need to get rid of this. Not everybody, but the people who matter. And so the idea. So in simple fact is, it was the modern 20th century liberals, people again, mostly like, especially Lyndon Johnson, and more Eleanor Roosevelt than Franklin Roosevelt, but so. The Roosevelt, the New Deal, and then of course Harry Truman, who ordered the desegregation of the U.S. military in 1948 when he decided to use African American civil rights as part of his Reconstruction campaign in 1948. Harry Truman, who was FDR's last vice president and became president only when FDR died shortly after his inauguration for his fourth term in office. Harry Truman, Lyndon Johnson, Hubert Humphrey, all these kind of people, Bill Clinton, Barack Obama, people like that who are great offenders against classical liberalism. They're only just trying to ensure some measure of equality for black people, and measure of equality for black people then led in its train to claims for equality for women, claims for equality for queers, claims for equality for disabled people, et cetera, et cetera. They clearly, all subsequent civil rights movements clearly have an enormous debt to African American civil rights activists. So next time you ask a conservative whining about this, ask them about that, see what they say. The Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act were completely legitimate uses of federal power, and it's hard to say otherwise. I mean, I can't say otherwise. But anyway, so now, unfortunately, to bring this back around to the election, whether they like it or not, the conservative position now, the conservatives gave the Republic Donald Trump. Donald Trump is now the modal conservative in the United States. And I mean, I see a lot of conservatives saying, hey, let him tough, you got him. You're doing it's your ideology and your politics and your policy that set up Donald Trump being able to win an election. Trump sort of doesn't really have, he has a politics, but he doesn't really have any policies per se, except for build a wall, and exclude Muslims and stupid shit like that. But his policies, such as they are, they suffer from a complete lack of philosophical coherence, much like trying to be conservative in a distinctly liberal republic. So he has that in common with conservatives. The Republican Party is supposedly our notionally conservative party in the United States. And it is conservative being the party of overt Christianity. This is not something I've talked about much before, and I'm going to start talking about it more. It's the real huge problems that's being created with Christians and Christianity in the United States. Not Christians per se, because a lot of individual Christians are lovely people. As near as I can tell, individual Christians who are lovely people are lovely despite being Christians instead of because of it. Because Christians, since they invaded, since they took over all of Europe, 1,000 years ago, and since they invaded the Americas 500 years ago, they've been pushy, greedy, nasty people who enforce their religion on other people. It's just gross. That is just, I mean, that's just historically indisputable. So, but more than one Republican candidate in 2016 claimed that God wanted to run for president. The wife of Ted Cruz actually claimed that he's running to show the American people the face of the God that we're all supposed to serve. I don't serve any God. I'm definitely not going to serve any God that looks like Ted Cruz. If Ted Cruz is a model of God, then I want absolutely nothing to do with God, because Ted Cruz is pond scum, and I don't want anything to do with him. So that, gross. So, as philosophically incoherent as Christianity is as a body of thought, it doesn't make any sense at all. It is at least internally consistent in a lot of ways. If you're willing to enter into the Christian crazy, then once you're inside the Christian crazy, it all suddenly makes sense in its own terms. The minute you pop your head up outside the Christian crazy, you're like, wow, this is crazy. But if you stick your head down, if you put batten Christian blinders on your face tightly enough so that you can't actually see reality outside of Christianity, then it can be internally consistent. Donald Trump, I don't think Donald Trump himself is a Christian. Donald Trump isn't anything other than a toddler who wants to get the next cookie immediately and can throw a temper tantrum if he doesn't get what he wants. So it's not necessarily makes sense to say that Donald Trump himself is a Christian, but Donald Trump did make the necessary obeisance to Christians and Christianity when he was running for president in 2016. He made his famous appearance at Liberty University where he did his whole 2 Corinthians boo-boo that even I know better. Even I know it's called 2 Corinthians, but anyway, I don't really claim to know squat about the Bible, but I know that. And he also suddenly became an opponent of abortion rights, which, please, right, you're kind of like suborning a woman to have an abortion for your own convenience before you expect me to believe that? I don't do that for 2 seconds. He's a clear example of the point that prohibiting abortion is just going to make abortion difficult for poor women to get. And rich women like Donald Trump's girlfriends will still be able to get all the abortions they want if they want an abortion. So like that David Jarley's guy in Tennessee who induced one of his girlfriends to get an abortion. These people, it's just ridiculous. We didn't even talk about it. The trying to prohibit abortion is just the dumbest idea on the planet, and it's never going to work. And all it does is cause misery. But anyway, but Christians in the United States vote Republican automatically because they believe the lie. The Republican lie that the Republicans are going to be able to stop abortion, and because they ultimately also hate queers, which is their subsidiary motivation for everything they do. So they want to stop abortion and they hate queers, and the Republicans tell them they're going to do that, and so they vote Republican, which is really dumb. But anyway. So predictably, this alliance between Christians and Republicans now looks very much like, shall we say, a deal with the devil. Could it be Satan? It turns out that a non-trivial number of Catholics in the United States are now talking about the Pope as being part of the deep state, that ridiculous Trump paranoid conspiracy theory, for endorsing government action to try to stop the spread of COVID. Apparently the Pope came in and said, yes, government should be able to, in contrast to the Supreme Court, which recently just struck down COVID restrictions in New York against the Catholic Church. The Pope was like, young rich shouldn't be going to mass in large numbers if it's going to spread COVID. And so so now American Catholics are like, well, the Pope's deep state and we don't like the Pope anymore. And so they're picking Trump over the Pope. I mean, the Pope's pawing scum too. The Pope refuses to deal with the problem of child molesting priests, which is disgusting and reprehensible. And I don't understand how anybody can ascribe it. I owe to moral authority to the Pope. I have no problem, no patience for the Pope. But as between if I have to pick between 2 evils, between Trump and the Pope is marginally the lesser of those 2 evils. So if I choose between the Pope and Trump, I'll pick the Pope. But American Catholics are now trying to pick the Trump over the Pope. Christianity, of course, is the original conspiracy theory, and so by having to choose between Trump and the Pope, you're just choosing between your conspiracy theories. Pick your conspiracy theory. 500 years after the beginning of the Protestant Reformation. This most Protestant, we're very Protestant, a lot of Catholics in the United States, but we're distinctly Protestant in our founding. We're apparently now going to start the Church of Trump. And they're free to do that. Our liberal constitution says you're free to do that. What makes all this even more hilarious is the Church of Trump is already falling into eternal squabbling and recriminations, both internally and with the Republican Party. Among the bad news for Trump and Republicans in 2020, let's say they lost even worse in 2020. They lost the youth vote even worse in 2020 than they did in 2016, which, that's a big surprise. Because, of course, what one would expect, because the Republican Party currently stands on the wrong side of essentially every major issue, and young people are not yet sufficiently indoctrinated with the stupid groupthink of our culture to be able to go along with Republican propaganda. So we can hope that There's no reason to think the Republicans are going to learn anything from 2020 more than they learned anything from 2012, which they had this big, after 2012 they lost in 2012, they did this big, let's review ourselves and figure out what's wrong. And they came with this interesting report that said, here's what's wrong with you, and they're like, oh, let's forget about that, we're not doing anything for that, let's go on and keep doing what we've been doing. And so they thought they had won a big victory with Donald Trump, but that, as I say, turned out to be a Pyrrhic victory at best. So anyway. One doubts they will learn anything more from having lost in 2020 than they did in 2012. And the future is not Republican, we can hope. And it's not, especially not if young voters have anything to say about it. And of course, yeah, guess what? Population, that population growth thingy, and young voters are going to grow up and they might get a little bit more conservative initially. As you get older, especially start having children. If you get children, you should be culturally conservative. It's good to hear your children. But, that doesn't have to translate into political conservatism because anyway. But so, yeah, I don't think that people are going to suddenly start voting Republican. And so then Trump continues on his whine fest. All the man does is whine. It's just embarrassing how much the man whines. He did finally have a sort of a modified press conference to answer some questions from reporters, which really did not go well. He called this one reporter lightweight because the man asked him a question about the election, and Trump started into his lies about the election, and the reporter kept insisting that he was wrong, trying to get him to insert some reality into Trump's answer. And Trump called him a lightweight and continued to lie, and just embarrassing, just very embarrassing. And he said, told the reporter, don't you ever talk to the President of the United States? I'm the President of the United States, so I never talk to the President of the United States that way. As if you were a parent chastising an unruly child. Sorry, you don't get away with that. We're all grown-ups here, and you're not anybody's parent. I mean, you're a parent to somebody. You're not your useless children, but it's because you're a model parent. Right, sure. You're not buying that, but anyway, you don't get to chastise adults when they're doing their jobs. This is the other thing. Trump just simply does not understand the concept of basically having a job to do and doing the job well, and especially if the outcome isn't what Trump wants. If the outcome isn't what Trump wants, well, by God, you did something wrong. No, they did their job right, and you lose. Shut up about it. The Trump campaign has now filed 38 lawsuits and won once. And then that one win was completely trivial, and it's not going to have anything come very close to reversing the results of the election. So he loses. Right now, I still think the single biggest hoot going on right now in terms of the election is, and this finally made CBS News, and so it's on the mainstream news, is the movement afoot to try to get Trump supporters to write in Trump's name on the runoff ballots in the Georgia Senate runoff elections in January. This is a hoot. It's a runoff election. You got two choices. You're going to vote for the Republican or the Democratic candidate. That's all there is to it. There's going to be the only two names on the ballot. That's it. But apparently they're saying, because this somehow. It's one of these things where I don't understand the logic, and I don't want to understand the logic. But somehow the fact that this runoff election is going to occur, the fact that they didn't fight hard enough to take Georgia for Trump, I don't understand what's going on here. But the idea is that Republican rank and file voters have some reason to be really irritated with the Republican Party, and they should take it on the Republican Party by either not voting in the Senate runoff in January or writing in Donald Trump. Go for it! Yay! I like that idea. That's a great idea. You should definitely do that. If you're a Republican voter in Georgia, you should definitely write in Trump or not vote in the Senate. This is really stupid, but it's really Republican. So anyway, that's just this one thing. Well, back to my original point that I'm sorry, I'm not trying to dismiss the suffering in the world, but this is really funny. It's really funny. And then include, so the second, I mean, it's hard to tell which is the first and which is the second. You can choose yourself. Right now, I'm going to say the second biggest hoot was the fact that Sidney Powell. Remember Sidney Powell? She's the lawyer whom the Trump campaign distanced himself from because she's too crazy for Trump. Can you imagine being too crazy for Trump? That's Sidney Powell. She came with she got her whole own special world of conspiracy theories going on there. Woo! That are beyond even the Trump conspiracy theories. That she's the one who came up with that idea. So the Hugo Chavez conspiracy theory is slightly less wacky and stands on its face. So her claim is that Hugo Chavez worked with the Dominion election machine people to come with an election machines that would ensure Hugo Chavez always wins elections in Venezuela. And then somehow the Dominion people came up to Georgia and paid off the Secretary of State and the governor of Georgia to adopt Dominion election voting machines in Georgia. And that's why Biden won Georgia. Not because Biden actually won the election, but because the Dominion paid off the Hugo Chavez Dominion machines to use the Hugo Chavez machines in Georgia. So she said she's going to release the Kraken, and all of her fans are, her loyal, addle-headed fans are, oh, she's going to, the Kraken, the Kraken's going to be this big deal. And it's going to be biblical, full of fairy tales in there. So she finally did. Apparently, somebody who actually pays more, who has better access to information than I do, looked it up and said that she has in fact filed in Georgia the Kraken, this supposedly earth-shattering lawsuit, and it just hasn't been assigned a file number yet. So these things sometimes take time. It's bureaucracy. But people have been distributing on Pet Twitter the copies of her lawsuit, and it has literally, it misspells circuit 2 different ways on the first page of the lawsuit. And it's littered with all sorts of other, spacing and spelling, and just all sorts of errors. And it's a bunch of crackpot conspiracy theories and others, some ideas that have already been rejected in other courts. So I mean, it's just legal nonsense. It's just stupid, and it's as stupid as you expected it to have been coming from the crazy crackpot lawyer. The lawyer's too crazy for Trump, remember? But she's filed the crack. She's unleashed the Kraken, and Twitter's all these people like, oh, what? Oh, she's really gonna knock it to him. She's gonna sock it to him. Boy, look at. So let's all remember. Keep in mind now. A couple of months from now, even like a couple of weeks from now, but especially a couple of months from now, after the Georgia courts in Georgia have had a chance to actually look at this lawsuit and laugh at it and laugh it out of court, remember to go back and ask all your conservative friends who are big Trump supporters, whatever happened to Sidney Powell's Kraken lawsuit? Anything? What I thought this was going to be biblical or shattering and change the results of the election. It's not. And be sure to remind people, you believe that, and it didn't come out. Kind of like, she didn't tell us the earth was going to end, but next time you hear somebody talking about, oh, the world's going to come to an end, it didn't happen. It didn't happen. But they keep believing. They don't lose the faith now. Well, I'll tell you, got to be blindly faithful in these ridiculous conspiracy theories. So anyway, so that's going on now, and so to say, I'm laughing hysterically both at the idea that Georgia voters Republicans in Georgia should not vote in the Senate runoff or write in Trump's name, and the idea that Sidney got the Kraken released. Oh, no boy, laughing at that. And through all of this now, so we still see people wondering whether or not Trump is going to attend Biden's inauguration. Who cares? The inauguration is pure window dressing. It's theater. It's irrelevant. The inauguration is to who's president. It stands in the same relationship to who's president as a wedding does to a marriage, right? So if you want to have a wedding, go ahead and knock yourself out. Have the biggest, ugliest, grandiose wedding. It makes you feel better. It's important to the participants. It's important to the parents. It's important to all these people to have a great big hairy wedding. But it doesn't have anything to do with whether you're actually married or not. You have to go down and get a license to get a marriage license. And your minister at the wedding has to sign the marriage license. It has to be duly authorized to sign. It's the license that makes the marriage, not the wedding. So the wedding is a big fancy party. A good wedding reception is a great place to go get blind drunk and have a big party. I have no problem. That's a great thing if you want to do it. Knock yourself out. But it has nothing to do with whether you're actually married or not. Whether or not the inauguration takes place, the president could take the oath of office in the bathroom in the White House and still be president. What matters is taking the oath of office and having the oath administered by a judge. It doesn't necessarily have to be the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. That's why we do it. A big ceremony up in front of the public to make the public say, oh, yay, we have a new president. So everybody knows what's going on, but it's not relevant. It's not necessary. When John Kennedy died in Dallas, they took Lyndon Johnson to the courthouse and said, here, find a judge. Any judge will do. Just get Judge Joe Blow over here. You can put him in front of the president and have him administer the oath of office. And bam, all of a sudden, Lyndon Johnson's president now because he's taking the oath of office and be duly sworn by a judge. And that's all that matters is taking the oath of office. It doesn't matter whether Trump shows up. It doesn't matter if they have an inauguration ceremony. It doesn't matter whether definitely doesn't matter if Trump shows up or not. It doesn't matter if Trump concedes. Trump's concession, Trump's presence, the inauguration is all completely irrelevant. He's lost. He's going to leave. He's going to have to leave office. Biden will be the next president of the United States. That's all there is to it. So anyway, but I've gone on for long enough now, and I'm So again, Republicans, Donald Trump's stupid and crazy. Republicans are stupid and crazy. People who support Republicans are stupid and crazy. And that's all I have to say. Bye bonds. Come back. Oh, and my book, The GOP Will Not Govern. Available on Amazon. It explains how it is that the Republicans seek high office for the prestige, the perks, and the opportunity to enrich themselves, not because they want to govern well. And so go buy and read my book. Thank you. Bye-bye.